It's the McShay Show presented by FanDuel. It's time for the first 12-team playoff, and you can bet on all of the action with FanDuel. Just think about all the opportunities we're going to have to bet on the college football playoff. We're talking about different conferences, home games for certain teams, the 3 or 4 week run that you're going to have to play. There's so much to earn if you're betting with FanDuel this college football playoff season. Why we love FanDuel? There's so many markets like spreads, over-unders, national championship futures, and so much more. This app is safe, secure, and easy to use. When you win, you'll get paid instantly. Visit FanDuel.com/McShay to download America's #1 sportsbook. The Ringer is committed to responsible gambling. Visit rg-help.com to learn more about the resources and helplines available. And listen to the end of the episode for additional details. Must be 21 and older and present in select states. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. It's a not so well-kept secret in television that Talking Coach Prime and the Dallas Cowboys, they're ratings grabs. And we promise not to be that show. But now we've got Coach Prime talking to Jerry Jones about the Cowboys coaching vacancy.
So could we talk about it?
Sure, why not? Then, is Jayden Daniels a unicorn, or can we learn something from the Commanders in that quick franchise turnaround? With so many teams looking to turn things around this offseason, today's our show. Provide a blueprint for the right way to build an NFL franchise.
Thank God we have all the answers, right?
We always do. We're on to the college football playoff national championship and the NFL divisional playoff. Plus, 99 days till the NFL draft, 99 days to the draft. Muench, you good?
I'm good, man.
DJ, spin us our favorite beats, baby. We are, right? I mean, it's inevitable and it's beautiful. It is a beautiful thing that, of course, we have in the offseason, the NFL. Cowboys struggle all season long. Got to keep them in the headlines. So what happens? Adam Schefter, of all people, reports that Jerry Jones and Coach Prime had a discussion. Then Adam Schefter texts Coach Prime, and Coach Prime texts him back. Says, yeah, we had a good conversation. Don't know where it's going to go. But it's kind of open. Love it here in Boulder. I mean, all the things you hear. Love it here in Boulder. Committed to what we're doing. But anytime Jerry picks up the phone and calls me, I'm going to listen. Don't know where it's going to go, right? Let me give you my quick thoughts on it, okay? And I want to discuss this back and forth. Jerry Jones is 82 years old. When he was around 52 years old, he parted ways with the best coach that he ever hired, Jimmy Johnson. They won Super Bowls. They did a whole lot of winning. How about them Cowboys, right? But it drove him crazy that Jerry wasn't the show, right? This is a family business. Do you watch Landman at all?
I have not watched it yet.
You got to watch it. I love it. Okay. I love it. But I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. I am, Yellowstone, all that, same director. Best acting job I've seen any NFL person do in a long, long time. And you know why it was a great acting job by Jerry Jones? Because he went on that show and he actually discussed his life. And in that acting bit he did with John Hamm and Billy Bob Thornton, it was talking about family and how the thing he's most proud of and the thing that basically he's going to go to his grave with a smile about is the fact that he got his family involved, his children, and that his children were part of the Dallas Cowboys. And this is a family thing, right? That is his number one, it's the most important aspect of what he's done. And I think when he fired Jimmy Johnson, that's when you started to see a shift. The Jones family is the show. And so we're going to bring in head coaches are normally alpha dogs, right? They're the alphas. And they're alpha pluses. The great ones are Bill Belichick, alpha plus. Bill Parcells, alpha plus. You think about all of them. And coaching has changed. And yes, there's more communication and you've got to be a player's coach to a certain degree with this day and age, but they're still alphas. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they become the show. Since then, Dallas has not done a whole lot of winning when it counts. but they've had a whole lot of coaches that are alpha minuses or beta pluses. I mean, if we're honest, right? Like truly, I'm gonna read you this list.
I did not see this coming.
And they're all good football people. They're all competent. They're all good football coaches, but they're all nice guys, and they're all guys that play the game and are willing to be in that position.
Right.
There's a lot of money that comes with it, a lot of fame that comes with it, a lot of attention that comes with it. So yeah, I'll put up with what goes on with Jerry Jones and the Jones family. Chan Gailey, Dave Campo. We'll get to the next coaching hire in a second. Wade Phillips, Jason Garrett, Mike McCarthy. All good coaches, very good coaches, some of them. All of them are able to play the game. The only one that wasn't able to play the game is Bill Parcells since. That's 30 years since he fired Jimmy Johnson. 30 years. It's not by accident that he's been hiring these guys, Steve. So when I see, and the one person I left out was Bill Parcells, and we all know how that ended. It's the only alpha plus guy that he brought in, and it was a massive headache, and the two couldn't coexist. They couldn't coexist. Just like Jimmy Johnson, despite all the winning, they couldn't coexist anymore because Jerry had to be the show. So Coach Prime, I mean, is there a bigger example in sports right now than Coach Prime as an alpha plus? He's his own industry, man. Like commercials, he's involved in everything. He's in forget branding. He's his own industry. How does that work? I'm asking you. How does that work?
I mean, that's the biggest question, because we'll get into this in a minute. There's a lot on paper that's interesting about it, and I get having the conversation, but you're right. Deion's not going to be Coach Deion's not going to be the kind of guy who's going to be comfortable staying out of the spotlight, and not necessarily in a bad way. That's just who he is. And if you're going to be successful at anything, you have to be who you are when you do it. And he has to be that guy who's out front, who's the leader, who is, taking the blame, but also taking the credit when things go well. And that kind of clash, those two egos is what makes this so fascinating to me. It's so volatile. It could go really well if this were to go down. The potential for it to absolutely explode is also there. And I think that's what makes it so interesting to people, is they want to sit and watch, and whether or not this is going to be a train wreck, and they're kind of like, looking out of the corner of their eye to see how bad it is, or could this actually work? Because that part of it I get. Listen, if you're looking for a head coach, I think you at least make the call to Coach Deion, and you see what his feelings are, what his thoughts are. And I know he's never coached in the pros, and we don't know what we don't know, and we'll see how he can make that transition and whether or not he could be successful doing it. But after watching him in Colorado, you see his history with the obviously the Dallas organization. I get making that call. I get his interest, and I get Jerry Jones' interest. I think it's, on paper, it makes sense for them to have a conversation. It's what you're talking about that makes it so fascinating, and whether or not they can get out of each other's way or manage the relationship in a way that will allow them both to be successful.
The press conference would be a thing of beauty, right? Like
the first conference, the whole thing, man, from beginning to end would be must-watch TV.
And that's what Jerry wants. So that's why I'm not ruling this out. As hard as it is to imagine, like at the end of the day, it's about football operations. How does the football operation work? We saw in New England, complete disaster, collaboration, no true boss. Robert Kraft is not that different. That situation in New England is not that different from the Jerry Jones falling out with Jimmy Johnson.
Oh,
but Jerry Jones just didn't put up with it as long, and the winning lasted longer with Bill Belichick. But you could, you don't even have to read that deep between the lines or in the tea leaves to realize that Robert Kraft, he wanted more say. He didn't want a dictator in the house. And so he wanted more collaboration. But I think Robert Kraft is wise enough that after a year of that project or experiment, that he realized, like, this isn't going to work. I don't know that Jerry, in this point of his career at 82 years old, having done it the same way for 30-something years and still made a boatload of money and has done it with his family and has done it, as him being the front face of the organization. I don't know that he's ready to, and forget even Coach Prime, anyone that he brings in. That's the fascinating part to me. Like, and why would Coach Prime want this job outside of just for the same reasons that Jerry would? Like, it would literally be the biggest show in sports. It may only be that for a year or 2 years. Then I promise you, like, that it is so clear to me that this would end in an explosion. Like, it would not end well.
There's the reaction to the Troy Aikman comments about the job opening was interesting to me.
That was interesting, right?
Yeah, it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One of what really kind of fascinates me was the response. Was it, oh, Troy Aikman said that this might not be an attractive job for a coaching candidate. And can you believe that? Yeah. Yeah, I can believe it. And I can believe it for some of the reasons you're discussing right now. I mean, it's a tough situation when you go in and you have that hands-on owner and he's always got his thumb on the scale and it's not really your program, it's his program. It's not that attractive of a job. You have a good but not great quarterback in Dak Prescott coming back. You have some issues in terms of free agency and cap space and all of these things. To me, what Aikman said was obvious. The only reason it's news is because he's an absolute legend, a Hall of Fame quarterback who won so many games for them. That's the only reason that it's news. If anyone else said that, I think, most people would think, just nod their head along and say, yeah, that makes complete sense. It's not that attractive of a job.
I look at Kellen Moore, excuse me, seems to be the name that, like, if you look at like odds-on favorites, it's Kellen Moore. And understandably, like when Mike McCarthy got the job, Kellen Moore was predetermined that Kellen Moore was going to be the OC. And that feels like a Jerry Jones hire, right?
Right.
In-house, my guy, appointed all along the way, going to do it my way. I know Kellen is a quarterback and evaluated him and interviewed him and all that stuff. I'm not saying he's not an alpha dog, but I'm saying in the coaching ranks, he's not been in a position to be the true alpha, right? So that's kind of that falls in line with what Jerry's done. So that one would make sense. The problem is there's no reasoning. It's like, it's like reasoning with an X when it's not going to work. Like your personalities don't jive, or the character flaws, male or female. Like, you get to a point where in certain relationships, no matter what the relationship is, you got to either set up boundaries, or you just learn to live with it. I just don't think. I just wonder what's gonna work. If Jerry's not going to change, then it's going to be a lot of the same, right? And the other thing too is, and not to cut off my own point, but the other thing too is Coach Prime only coming if we're going up and getting my son? If we're going to get Shedeur Sanders in the draft, how's that going to work? Where does Dallas pick? Dallas, I don't think Dallas is in the top. What are they, 11, 12?
I think
in the top 10.
12, right? Yeah, 12. They're 12.
12. So while most people in the league rank these quarterbacks in that range, like mid-first at best, I still think they're going to go higher than – I don't think they're going to sit there. Now, how would that even work? Like, is Coach Prime going to say, well, my son's not going to go play anywhere else, so he's got to come here?
Right. So you just got to let him wait till 12. We're not giving anything up to go get him. No, I mean, we've talked about this a lot. No team is going to let that happen. Someone in the top 11 picks will say, okay, we're taking Shedeur, and then you got to come get him. Right. Or or just trade up now so we don't have to deal with all this nonsense.
And by the way, you've got a quarterback in Dak Prescott that you just
paid. Which that's a whole other thing, talking about that contract. Yeah. Still a little intriguing. The idea of it,
it's fascinating.
Yeah. The idea, and I'm not sure. Again, I'll say this over and over again. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know. Deion, I think, has been great for Colorado. Will he be able to have that kind of success at the NFL level? I don't know. Will he be able to handle the big personalities, the CeeDee Lambs, the Micah Parsons?
Yeah, let me ask you that question. When we first started talking about this and when the information came kind of across the board, one of my first thoughts was, and I promise you I'm asking this question because I don't have the answer, and I don't know that anyone truly has the answer, but I'm just curious your opinion. Like, as a college coach and the way that Coach Prime goes about his business, like those young men, 18, 22 years old, look up to him, view him as like the guy, a lot of like father figure, those sorts of, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to work, period, in an NFL locker room? Because I think part of his value, I think part of Coach Prime's value at the college level is he truly can reach these young men, and he truly can help develop them as men, as productive members of society, help them in critical years of development. Okay, I truly do believe that. And people may not agree with his philosophies on it and what he thinks is right and wrong, and the showmanship and all that stuff. I understand that, but you can't argue that he doesn't reach them.
Right.
Coach Pro, part of his secret sauce is he truly reaches them and he truly cares. Okay. Will that then translate to the end? He's not coming in as the X's and O's guy, this brilliant offensive scheme or a brilliant defense. He's coming in as a guy who can reach his players and inspire them and get them to play as one and run the operation. Will that work as you're trying to, like, as a free agent? Do I want to go to Dallas and I don't want to say deal, but that be the dynamic? Am I looking for that dynamic? Or am I 28, 29, 30 years old? I'm looking to go win, obviously, to go get paid, obviously. But if the winning opportunities and the money opportunities are all the same, am I choosing that environment with Coach Prime? Or is it just a little too much or a lot for me?
I'm not naive about it. I mean, Nick Saban's the GOAT, and ask him about trying to make the transition to the NFL and how that went for him. It obviously didn't work well. What I will say is that if you're one of those players, man, I don't know how you're not want to play for Deion, because the difference there is that Deion was so successful at the NFL level, and he could pull a guy aside like a Micah Parsons and be like, "Look, man, I know your contract's up. This is what I went through when I went to San Francisco. This is what I had to deal with when I was the Cowboys." He had that kind of success at the NFL level. We're talking about Hall of Fame corner, maybe the best of all time, right? He's in that conversation. That is a unique background.
Yeah.
And that is something where I think that, you can have guys who are great college players and they can be great college coaches. To be that kind of a player at the pro level and to have that kind of experience and to be able to share that with these players and to pull them into your office and be like, yeah, no, don't explain this to me. I've been there, man. I know where you are right now. I've been through struggles. I've played really at a high level. I've been an all-pro. Like, I know, I've done contracts. I know how all of this works. And you can either sit here and listen to me and we can have a conversation about it, or you can tell me that you know better. And those are the kind of players really you're going to want to weed out of your program anyways. So to me, I don't know, but
Yeah.
there's reason to be optimistic about him being different than other coaches who have tried to make this jump.
Mike Vrabel is one of the first guys that pops in my head when you say like a head coach that has that
Right.
cachet, that has that, and Deion was a more prolific, dynamic, player during his days, but Vrabes did an awful lot of winning and was a hell of a football player in the Ring of Honor in New England, all that stuff. The difference is I don't view Vrabel as trying to, there's different cultures. That's how I would put it.
Right.
I think it's more of a business coaching demanding with Vrabel. I don't know. I don't
actually, the more you talk about it, I'm not sure they're that different, other than Deion was a much more prolific player in the league. I think that Deion could be that same kind of pro coach where he's very demanding of his players and sets high expectations. I think he's done that at Colorado.
There's no question.
Did you see the Taylor Lewan clip about Vrabel going to New England? And when he's like, he's going to tell you that he played in the league for this many years. He's going to tell you about every 5 minutes. And I just thought it was hilarious. I could just see Vrabel being like, you know how many games I played? You know, when I was with Belichick and Brady and blah, blah, blah. I just thought it was great that he was, kind of poking fun of Vrabel while still giving him a little bit of an endorsement. But listen, I think that Deion could run that kind of a tight ship. I don't think he's going to be, when I'm talking about him with those conversations with these players and the way he could connect with a 28-year-old NFL player, I don't mean that as I think he's going to be a player's coach. I actually don't. I think it just gives him a unique perspective to bring into that conversation and say, look, you're not going to explain anything to me that I don't already know, and can say to them, like, you don't have to take that number, and I get it, and you want more, and if you can go get it, go get it. But these are the realities of this situation. Now, I do think it gets very complicated if you bring your son in to play quarterback, because then it's a whole different thing. Now, I'm talking about if Shedeur Sanders doesn't, if they don't make a big move to get him, and Shedeur Sanders doesn't end up with that star on his helmet, it's a very different situation as a veteran when you're coming in and you're saying, oh, your son's the quarterback. Are you going to be willing to make the change if you need to make the change? And that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, and it's not like Dak is disliked in Dallas.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it would be an all or nothing. It would, talk about taking a big hack for the fences.
And I hope it happens.
Well, everyone in our position, everyone in media, everyone who doesn't, it's easy to, because it's the ratings grab. Like I said off the top, it's the story. It would make sense in that it absolutely falls in line with, we've got to have the most attention on the star. Here we are. From a football operations standpoint, knowing Jerry is who Jerry is, and that is not changed in over 3 decades, I don't see how it works.
I agree with you. That's
from a business standpoint, from marketing, PR, it falls right in line with what they are.
That version of Hard Knocks would be the greatest reality show of all time.
Oh my God.
I'm just going to go ahead and say it.
I mean, the ratings would be absurd. All right. I mentioned Vrabel and New England, another team this offseason. They jumped on it quickly. They got their guy. I don't think anyone can completely disagree. I think most people we're screaming for this. Teddy Bruschi, friend of ours, and obviously a good friend of Vrabel's and a Patriots legend, was screaming for it and got it. And I think everyone in New England is kind of in line with it. This is the right decision. And it's the right decision because of what I just mentioned before. I think Robert Kraft needed a year to kind of cleanse himself and test the waters and kind of run things the way that Jerry's wanted to run them for a while. And it's not dissimilar. Families in charge. We're the owners. We want more say. We think we can. But I give Robert Kraft a ton of credit because this hire signals maybe I'm better off in a role where I'm supporting everything, I'm owning, I'm giving the resources to the people that I'm bringing in to run the operation. No different than being an owner of a company and hiring the right CFO and CMO and all. And Vrabel's made it clear. I'll give him credit just in hearing him talk. It's been very clear that Ryan Cowden, who worked with him at the Titans for a handful of years and spent the last year with the Giants, that he wants Ryan to come in and be part of the personnel decision-making. But he hasn't gone in. He had good conversations, he said, with Elliott Wolf. He hasn't gone in and said, I'm clearing house. He hasn't done that. And there's value in Elliott Wolf. Like everyone you talk to in personnel, circles, like he can evaluate talent. He's a college scouting background. So instead of the beauty is that Elliott Wolf was never promoted to general manager. He had this different title. And so I think Vrabel comes in, is going to bring in his guy in Ryan Cowden, it sounds like. And Elliott Wolf, at least the initial thoughts are, will wind up being part of the personnel group. But at the end of the day, don't make any mistake about it. Vrabel is aligning this. And I think part of the reason why it was no longer going to work in Tennessee, Vrabel's aligning this where he is the ultimate decision maker.
Of course. I don't think he takes that job otherwise.
Of course not. And so in hiring Vrabel, it's very clear. It doesn't signal. It's very clear that the Kraft family has said, all right, we need someone to handle all this, and Vrabel can handle all this. So it's a releasing the power. Right?
I agree. I will say this. I I disagree with the Elliott Wolf situation, and I mean no disrespect to him. I think he's a
Okay.
respected talent evaluator. He's an asset to a team. Too many chefs in the kitchen, man. You're bringing your own guy in. Yeah, I think it's time. It's time to part ways and have a clean start. Let Elliott Wolf go elsewhere. He'll be fine.
And he
Uh,
may.
he may. I just don't. How does that work
I don't
when
disagree.
when
We've
you
been
sit
parts of
down?
different companies, buying out different companies and all that. And inevitably what happens is the new core that comes in, it may not be immediate, but eventually there's an inability to jive.
Right,
And then there's a lot of like,
arranged
and then
marriages,
you hear
man.
it.
Arranged
Yeah,
marriages.
and the thing that I've gone through, the experiences I've had from starting the war room with Gary Horton, and you were part of the very first stages of it, and have been with me ever since. And going from that to like sporting news, and sporting news to ESPN, and ESPN bought out by Disney, and like ultimately at the end of the day, what happens every time is that, and people like water cooler talk. It's not like it's texting, it's cell phones, it's meeting for dinner or drink, and the conversations start as whispers, and then they get louder, and then people from the new group that came in hear that their conversation's going on, they get offended, and it just winds up splintering, right?
Yeah, what happens when
And
you sit down in a suite in Indianapolis and you're watching players and Elliot Wolf says, "Man, I really like this defensive end or this edge for Penn State." And Cowden's like, "That's not really the kind of player that we look for in the system." Like, how do those conversations go?
they don't end well,
They generally not. I mean,
generally. Yep.
it can work, and it could work in New England. I'm not saying we know everything about everything, but that's a tough spot to be in. I to me, it makes more sense that New England is clearly making a clean start here than
And Vrabel's as
make a
strong a
clean cut.
personality. He's as strong a personality as you'll ever be around, and he gives zero fucks. Zero.
Zero.
Zero. Like I promise you, I've
He
been around.
never, as a
Like
player either. He does
I
not
remember
care.
going out and hanging out with Urban and hanging out at practice at Ohio State, and like there was one general there, but he had a top lieutenant, and everyone else like ultimately it was Urban's deal, but it was very clear that who the second in charge was, and he was just as powerful in terms of everyone below. Like he is a strong personality. And so if that strong personality is bringing in his guy, they're going to align, and you better either take all that ego bottle like and throw it out, or just go find another place to
Right.
operate. Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Should we get into just kind of in this conversation about leadership groups? And
Yep.
we were sitting around talking, and we're talking about Jayden Daniels, who we've talked about a fair amount over the course of the pod, and what has made him so successful in Washington. And it's some of the things that we're discussing about what Dallas is maybe lacking, what New England is looking to get right now, and it's really to me is the
Oh,
leadership group.
yes, and we saw in Washington new ownership, new head coach, strong leadership that is effective, that actually like is kind and caring, and takes care of the people inside the organization. All things that did not exist with Daniel Snyder. All things like beyond not exist. Like it was. I mean, I have a very good friend, Todd Klein, who put together the whole deal for the Hard Rock Cafe. I grew up with Todd, one of a
Oh
small
yeah,
group of friends from a small town. You know Todd, and he worked with the Redskins for just a little bit, and so I got to know some of the stories, and I can't even share them.
right.
Just couldn't get
I
out of
mean,
there fast enough.
saying that Dan Snyder mismanaged the football operations might be the nicest thing you can say about the man.
Right.
And that's saying a lot. And it matters. Listen, it matters when you create anyone who's ever had a job. If you've ever had a job where it's a toxic, quote unquote toxic, I don't really love all these terms with the toxic workplace, where you're not comfortable working somewhere, where you're not comfortable going in day to day. The waterfall effect of that is catastrophic. It's catastrophic when people aren't comfortable where they are, where they're not happy where they are. And when you're able to create an environment like it seems that Josh Harris, the new owner of the Commanders, has been able to create there, things can start to turn around quickly. And I think that's what you've seen with that franchise.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Snyder was a horrible human being. Period.
Yeah, I mean, there's no
so that's
sugarcoating
easy. And what he did is he, you just said waterfall. It made me like I had a mental image. Like this new ownership group has come in and they've like they looked at a garden that hadn't been watered in decades and put some water on it, and all of a sudden started to see things come alive and grow.
Did you see what Harris said after the game, after the win? He said twice, I think he said, just said talent, culture, people. Talent, culture, people. It's that simple, man. It really is that simple. And then when you take that approach, you're getting talented players in there. You're creating a culture where they can grow, where they can develop, and you're putting also your front office people, your training staff, your coaches, everyone in an environment where they feel like they are in a position to grow and get better at their job. It's incredible what can happen. I mean, and look, obviously getting Jayden Daniels, you want to give Jayden Daniels all the credit in the world, but there's enough praise for a team that goes from 7-9 and hadn't had a winning record since 2016 to go to 12-5 and win a wild card game. I think there's enough praise to go around to Dan Quinn, the head coach, and to Adam Peters, the GM, and to the ownership group, and to Cliff Kingsbury, the offense coordinator. When you start looking at why it's not their roster. Their roster's pretty good. They got some players. They still have a lot to do. I think that's kind of what's scary about them going forward is they're in a position with cap space to really build that thing out next year, and they could be an even better team. It's not their roster. I think it's the people that they've brought in and the environment they've created.
I was fascinated. So just, full transparency. I had a personal thing to deal with yesterday, all good. But you guys had a conference call and discussed some different topics and kind of threw some things at me. And I do this all the time. Like I've got to control myself sometimes, but I wound up going in this rabbit hole, right? Because I'm looking at it and we've got this clear picture. We could throw up the top 10 picks, the draft order, right? We've got this picture. Now we know who's drafting at the top, starting with Tennessee and then Cleveland, the Giants at 3, Patriots 4, Jaguars, Raiders 5 and 6 respectively, then Jets, Panthers, Saints, and Bears. Okay. And we did the QB or not QB basically next to it. And as you can see, 6 of the top 10 need quarterbacks. Okay, Muench?
Right.
I got in this rabbit hole of why do we overly complicate this thing? Okay. You either identify a quarterback that you truly believe in. In some years, there just aren't in the draft. Some years, there just aren't quarterbacks you truly believe in. That doesn't I can think Cam Ward is the savior, is going to, transform an organization. It has tools that will do it and we believe in, and you can believe otherwise. And I promise you, in talking to people throughout the league, it's that there's a line in the sand. There are some that believe that Cam Ward can be that guy. There are some that believe that Shedeur Sanders can be that guy. But to be quite honest, more often than not in the conversations I'm having, there's lack of certainty. Or it's, I'm glad we're not in a position this year to have to draft one of those guys. It's not the year. Last year was the year. 6 guys drafted in the top 12. All of them shown promise, except J.J. McCarthy. But even J.J. before his injury was tracking to be the starter of the Minnesota Vikings. And we know he's in a great situation with one of the best quarterback coaching head coaches out there in Kevin O'Connell. So when I look at this situation, I started down this rabbit hole. I started to say, okay. And it started with you, Muench. It started with what you said. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. Tennessee, we saw Rand Carthon was fired. And you asked me if I was GM, what would he do? And I said, first of all, try to trade the pick. And I went down the list of things. And you were like, and I ultimately said, but at the end of the day, you've got to find your quarterback. So maybe you just take a hack at one of these guys if you believe in them. And you were like, I don't know, man. I'm going defensive line. I'm getting a pass rusher. And when we were done with the show, I was like, yeah, yeah, Muench is right. Muench is right. Seriously, that. If I really truly was in the GM position, I've done this study over and over again. Over and over again. I know what works. I didn't work for Ozzie Newsome, but great friends with Joe Douglas and have been the process that has worked for them has been shared. I have friends throughout the league and a lot of these different places. We've been fortunate enough to kind of learn like what works, why it works, what's behind it. How, like sitting in Indianapolis at the Conrad Hotel and guys from the league coming in and out. And it's not like, oh, did you see that 40-yard dash on the player? Did you see this? No, it's let me tell you a story about this player.
Right.
Let me tell you about how much he loves this game. It's talking to Jason Garrett in Indy one day and just sitting down having a good conversation with him about trust. Do we have players that have trust and hunger? And it's a tough thing to find.
Mm-hmm.
And then talking about the importance and how you build a roster and build it with, you've got to obviously have the quarterback. But when you finally get the quarterback, no matter how you get it, you better have everything else in place. You better be able to protect, and you better have a vicious, ferocious defense. Truly.
Right.
And the rest you can hand pluck. The rest in the second, third, fourth round, you can find a wide receiver. The Steelers have done it for decades. The Packers have done it for decades. And when you see some of the great teams, when they mess up, like the Ravens, where have they messed up in the draft?
You tell me.
Over and over and over again. Wide receiver.
Oh, wide receiver. Yeah.
When the Patriots
they
messed
hit on
up.
Zay, so I'm giving them some credit.
Yeah, but for like over a decade,
Years,
it was missing running backs for a lot of these places. The Patriots miss on wide receivers, miss on running backs, right? So I did this deep dive, and this is the worst television, radio, podcast thing you could ever do. All right,
here for it.
But bear with me. I haven't been able to do this shit my entire career, so I'm going to wear you out for a few minutes. But I just want people to understand when we talk about the importance of building a roster and not just swinging for a quarterback just because it's the only quarterback there. Here's what's going on when teams are in their meetings and they're looking at the big picture. And we're not here for 1 year. We're not here to just win next year. We're here to try to build an organization. And if you're drafting in the top 10, in most of these cases, they're trying to rebuild an organization that has fallen off the rails, okay? Philadelphia Eagles, I think we can all agree, for a long time, they've been successful. You don't have to agree with some of their people in their personnel department. You don't have to agree with some of their moves, all that. But what's the foundation? Howie Roseman's been there since 2010 to present, calling the shots. 2010, 5 defensive players drafted, okay? 2 pass rushers, starting with Brandon Graham that year. 2011, offensive guard, solidify our trenches. Then 3 defensive players. 2012, 4 or 5 defensive players, including Fletcher Cox. Also, Nick Foles was that one offensive pick. Okay. 2013, 5 defensive players, just 3 offensive players. And one of the offensive players was Lane Johnson with the first pick. Again, in the trenches. Okay. Zach Ertz was the other offensive player early in that draft. Identifying players. Yes. Okay. 2014, 5 of 7 defensive players. 2015, 5 of 6 defensive players. From about 2014 on, they were an elite defensive team with a solid offensive line. Then they bring in 2016, Carson Wentz. They also draft a guard, a running back, and an offensive tackle. Okay, because it's time. We've got an elite defense for the last couple of years. We've got to change. We've identified our quarterback. Doesn't matter how it all turned out in the end. We've identified our quarterback. Let's get him another offensive lineman, running back, offensive tackle. Then they drafted, but in that same year, the next 4 picks, defensive players. 2017, first 3 players, defensive players. 2018, Goddard, great pick. Then got 2 defensive players and 2 offensive tackles. So you're following me here, right?
Right.
The other thing the Eagles did throughout all of this, every year, 2 years, they drafted a quarterback.
Right.
Okay. Didn't always work out. But you go back to Walsh and the whole, like, the history of the NFL, and it's, like, the personnel people, smart personnel people follow this model. I don't care if it's 5th rounder, 6th rounder. Every couple of years, let's bring in another quarterback. Let's try to develop them. And then if the worst case, we got a solid backup that we want. Best case, he becomes a starter. Somewhere in between, we get some value trading him, right? So
especially with the way rookie contracts are now, especially with the way rookie contracts are.
Yeah,
it's a no-brainer.
It's stealing money. Nick Foles in 2012, Matt Barkley 2013, Carson Wentz in 2016, Thorson in 2019, Jalen Hurts, 2nd round pick in 2020. Then even in 2022, they draft McKee.
Mm-hmm.
He had to come in and play. You just don't know. That's Philly. How about Kansas City with Brett Veach? They get their quarterback. First year that Brett Veach, and I told you, when he was a personnel guy, who was banging down the door, bugging the shit out of Andy Reid. That Mahomes is the guy. 2 years before he was even eligible. They got Mahomes in 2017. Veach was promoted to GM. Also got Kareem Hunt. After that, you ready?
Yep.
All this trend. It's so obvious. 2018, all 6 picks, defensive side of the ball. 2019, wide receiver McCole Harmon, then 3 defensive players in a row. 2020, Edwards-Helaire, not a great pick at running back. I talked about it. Wide receiver, running back, be careful, first round. Unless we're talking top 10, like the elite guys.
I loved Edwards-Helaire coming out of LSU, and it just hasn't panned out.
Yeah, but then after Edwards-Helaire, 4 of the next 5 players, defensive players. 2021, 2 of the first 3 picks, defensive players, including Nick Bolton. 2022, now we have an elite defense.
Yeah.
Still 5 of their first 6 picks on the defensive side. 2023, still an elite defense. 5 of their first 7 picks. Right? So when you have the quarterback and you have a great defense with it, the quarterback makes up for so many sins on the other side. We didn't luck into. We took a real chance on a major character guy in Tyreek Hill. Paid off, right? Kareem Hunt came in, but you can pluck guys, free agents, draft later. You can find guys that are offensive weapons. Make sure you're protecting your quarterback, but you better have a damn good defense. Baltimore, same thing. Ozzie Newsome. I mean, you can go all the way back to the Ray Lewis and some of their picks, but you go back to 2009, like offensive tackle Michael Orr, then 3 defensive players. 2010, first 2 defensive players. 2013, first 4 players drafted, defense. 2014, 4 or 5 defense. 2015, they went more offense and they had some busts, but then they hit on Carl Davis and Zadarius Smith. Offensive tackle in 2016, then 3 defensive players. 2017, first 5 picks, defensive player. Like the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Eagles, I could do the same thing. I could go down the road for Buffalo, right? Mm-hmm. The Bills, a long list of guys. Josh Allen came in 2018. After Josh Allen, they had 4 defensive players. The 2 years before that, it was 3 defensive players, Lawson, Ragland. 2017, the year before Josh Allen, cornerback, and then offensive line with a receiver in there. Then after Allen, it was defensive tackle for the first pick in 19. Then in 2020, first pick was an edge. 2021, first 2 picks are edges, Russo and Basham. And then after that, 2 offensive tackles. It's the same trend. So you look at the playoffs now, right? Mm-hmm. And even the Rams, you watched that game last night, even the Rams, the better offensive. I texted Les Snead, their GM, 5-6 days ago. Out of the blue, I'm watching the Rams play. I think it was in the final week. I forget. I don't know why. It just hit me. I'm like, I haven't reached out to Les in a while, but my goodness, like, remember, this is the same guy who was wearing like "fuck draft picks" that T-shirt. You know, when they went out and got all the free agents.
I kind of like
that,
yeah. It was a push.
It's not his like principle and how he was raised in all of this, but everyone was saying they won't draft for 4 years, and he's like, yeah, I get it, but different circumstances,
he's tapping the ring on the
different opportunity. Yeah, I get it. But in order to replenish that roster, and in order to stay near the top, they had to then, once all the free agent stuff and all the cap issues and all that, how do we stay competitive? We better start drafting guys. Let's get Puka Nacua. Let's identify him. Let's go to Florida State and get 2 players that for some reason are vastly underrated. Jared Verse and Fisk, right? And look at where they are now. You know? And I'm not saying it's an elite team that's going to go win in Philly, but I'm watching 9 sacks last night and a vicious defense matched up with what? A good quarterback that has enough weapon. You know what I mean? Like, this, like, to me, like, that's the draft blueprint.
Right.
That right there is the draft blueprint. Draft a quarterback, find your guy. If it takes 5 different hacks at it in 7-8 years, find your guy. But when you do it, already have everything in place. Loading up on defensive front guys, loading up on cornerbacks and versatile defensive backs, right? and making sure your offensive line is good enough to protect that asset. The rest, we can find a running back.
Yeah.
Wide receivers' value's gone up so much, and I get it, and it should be. But get one of the elite ones, or wait till the second round. Wait till the third. Like, there are other guys to get. Identify those guys.
You talked about the Ravens a little bit really quickly. A guy that they're not there yet, but someone I'm really excited to watch going forward is the general manager for the Chargers, and I know that they just had a tough loss. But Joe Ortiz might be the least surprising story that he's already killing it, because everyone knew once he got his shot, he was so ready. He's so talented. He's so good at what he does. And then for him, first two picks, he takes Joe Alt and Lad McConkey. That's a pretty good start. And then he got the corner out of Maryland, Tarheeb Still, in the 5th round.
Yeah.
He looks like he's going to be a dude.
Yeah. He had a great year.
I mean, they went from 5-12, last in the AFC West. And again, I know it was a tough end, but they were 11-6 this year. I'm excited to see what Ortiz, with that background, he knows what he's doing with that background, what they do, spinning it forward. But Joe,
yeah.
Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say Joe Ortiz is another example of paying your dues, doing it the right way for a long time. Joe Douglas did the same thing, had the same experience, right? Joe Ortiz was there, and also wait for the right opportunity. Find the right opportunity. Harbaugh, commitment
Herbert
from the organization, a quarterback like that. Vrabel's coming back to New England, Ring of Honor, Super Bowl rings, all that shit. Like, all of that is fun.
Right.
Vrabel's in New England because of Drake May.
Right.
Period. Okay? I believe that. And it's why it was such an attractive job. If Drake May just kind of sputtered this year and didn't show all the promise, I don't know that they're landing Vrabel or an elite coach, because now you've got an owner that appears to be, after 1 year, kind of like meddlesome and I just don't know that that's the destination I want. You're not going to land a Ben Johnson, one of these, like, the top guys. Vrabel and Ben Johnson are the top 2 names. New England landed one. And you can't tell me it didn't have a ton to do with Drake May.
Absolutely not. So as that conversation is a backdrop, I love doing this to you. The Jets are calling, the Titans are calling, and the Raiders are calling. They all want to offer you the job. What's the best situation to go into as a GM right now? Which one of those spots would be the best for you?
All right. Only 2 of them matter here, because the Jets are third by the greatest distance you can ever imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you've made your thoughts clear about it, and if anyone hasn't heard it, it's the ownership. The ownership is an issue. It's been a mess for a long time. Then you also look at the Aaron Rodgers situation. They have aging free agents at tackle. You've got 3 young players you're going to have to pay soon. It's a mess, and it all starts with Woody Johnson, the owner, and you're obviously not a fan.
Yeah, Woody Johnson could offer me $3-4 million to be the GM tomorrow, and I would turn it down.
Okay, if you're listening, Mr. Johnson, I'd probably take that deal.
Yeah, and I'd be your assistant GM. So all right, fascinating question. I love it.
So it comes down to Raiders and Titans. Can I tell you who I would go with?
No, you asked me the question. I'm going to answer it. I would actually go with the Raiders, even though I think there's a little more dysfunction. But here's why I would do it: because I would align myself with Tom Brady. I would align myself with Tom. And as long as Tom and I were on the same wavelength and how to proceed with this organization, I think Mark Davis would then be in line with it. And then I could create the culture. I could call the shots. Tom would, inevitably have a say in it, but I would utilize Tom as an asset rather than view it as he's making more decisions than he should. If I could align myself with Tom, I think that would be the more intriguing spot. Tennessee's difficult because they've gone through, it was John Robinson, now Rand Carthon, new head coach. I worry about that. And neither place has a quarterback. So that's the first obstacle. Tennessee's drafting. Yeah. And if I'm Tennessee and I can't trade out of that pick, I'm following the blueprint. I'm following the blueprint. Look at Detroit, another example. Penei Sewell in 2021, offensive tackle. Then Levi Onwuzurike. First 3 picks, OT, DT, DT. 2022, Hutch, right? And then Jameson. Detroit's fascinating. I know I'm going. I'll come back in a second. Detroit's fascinating because it's all about offensive line, defensive line, DB, versatile DBs, dudes, and to run that Aaron Glenn defense. But Detroit's blueprint was this, and I don't have knowledge of the picks or anything like that. But Chris Spielman, and I worked with him for years. He is a very close personal friend, and the things that he's preached to me about, and the things that are within that organization, with Brad Holmes as the clear leader, and I can't praise Brad Holmes enough for the job he's done in Detroit as a general manager since taking over that job in 2021. But organizationally, and this isn't what they've said, these words, but essentially organizationally and from the draft standpoint, we're going to be the baddest mofos on the block, but we're also going to have the fastest getaway cars.
Yeah.
Truly.
That's a really interesting way of putting it.
We're going to beat you up in the trenches. We're going to be bigger and stronger up front. We're going to have defensive linemen that are nasty. We're going to get after you. We're going to have DBs that can play, that are multiple, that'll come up and hit you. We're going to have all that stuff. Grit, right? Dan Campbell, all falls in line. There's a culture. I hate the word culture. There's a personality to that team. And I get news for you too. Find players that fit the profile. The profile for Detroit. You talk about blueprints. I've talked to Bill Polian about this for years. They brought in a psychologist before it was even a thing to find the profile of individuals that love the game, not what it brings to them, but actually love the freaking game and fit the profile. You talk about fitting a profile in Detroit. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th round pick, hardest working dude out there, right? Malcolm Rodriguez, absolute leader, tough guy, going to give you every last ounce in that body, 6th round pick. James Houston from Jackson State, 6th round pick. Josh Paschal, I don't know that we've ever evaluated a player, Muench, sitting in hotel rooms in Mobile, in Indianapolis, talking to GMs and scouts. Like the stories we heard about his leadership and what he had to overcome, these are the profile of players, some of the highest FBI guys, football intelligence guys out there. I mean, literally some of the best football intelligence players I've ever studied, right? Hutch at defensive end, Penei Sewell at offensive tackle, Campbell at linebacker, Branch as your star, Terry and Arnold. Ask Nick Saban what he thinks. Ask Miss Terry what she thinks about Terry and Arnold as a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kirby Joseph, safety. Just guys that are smart football players that love the game. So that's the profile. We're going to be smart. We're going to be tough. We're going to have the grit. But we also are going to sprinkle in the fastest getaway cars in the world because we got Jameson Williams, right?
Yeah.
We got Jahmyr Gibbs, and we got Sam Laporta. So when it seemed like, boy, why are they drafting a running back and a linebacker and a tight end? They've got 4 picks in the first 2 rounds. What are they doing? They knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, but that takes time, right? And it takes, something we haven't really talked about. There's still a little magic in this game, man. You can have all the ingredients, and sometimes it just doesn't come together. There's still a little magic, and things have to work out. You're in your way, and I think that it's trending that way for Detroit. They've had a great year, and that takes time. And when you're talking about taking a Raiders job where they've had 5 GM, this will be their 5th GM and their 5th head coach since they moved to Vegas in 2020. So, are you comfortable with the fact that Davis is going to take the time?
I think Tom Brady changes the whole thing. I truly do.
I do too. I'm not going to, you know what? I'm trying to play devil's advocate, but I'm with you. I'm taking the Raiders too. And I don't like, it was what I was going to say before. I don't like arranged marriages. Brian Callahan could be a great coach in this league, but he's still there. So now you're coming as a GM. I don't know. They're doing something. They're firing a head coach, keeping a GM, firing the GM, keeping the coach. I don't understand what the plan is.
Yeah, it's a terrible two-step that they're running.
I don't get it,
Tennessee
man.
Two-step. I agree.
And if it was last year and I had the first overall pick, man, we just won the lottery, baby. But it's not last year. And that's how draft cycles work. You're in a much different spot. So you're hoping someone falls in love with Cam Ward and you can maybe trade back and get a lot of assets. I think that would probably be the best move. They're not a quarterback away, man. They are not a quarterback away from being a great team. They have other holes they need to fix. So ideally, they can trade back. And if this was last year, they'd be in a better position to do it. So people will be like, oh, you don't want to be the GM of the team with the first overall pick? Not right now. I feel better about the Raiders situation. I just feel a better about what that looks like long term. And again, I get the past. Mark Davis, I mean, he goes through. Tom Telesco, the GM who was just fired for the Raiders, drafted Brock Bowers and 2 starting offensive linemen last year, and he's out. It's a tough business, man.
But I think he's out for a good reason. It has nothing to do necessarily with the job that he did.
No,
it's because we don't want a prearranged marriage. We don't want an arranged marriage. We don't want to force someone. We want someone who's going to come in and we're going to start this organization over. And Tom Brady this past year was finally given permission or whatever it is from the NFL and was allowed to. He now is a functioning member of that ownership group. And you're kidding yourself if he doesn't have the loudest voice. If you think he doesn't have the loudest voice when it comes to making football decisions, because Mark Davis, absolutely. And so that organization, I feel like, has an opportunity to bring in people in leadership roles that will have the right direction. Okay. So that's why I would choose Raiders first, then Titans, and then I would turn down the Jets job.
I love that it's just a non-starter for you. Not even the challenge of going in and maybe turning that franchise around, a storied franchise that, a big market. You think you could maybe turn it around for him? No.
The other thing, Stevie boy, that is very clear in going through all this. You'd be amazed how many teams wind up with 4 picks in a draft, 2 picks in a draft, 7 picks in the not 7, 5 picks in a draft,
right? And
do it like 2 out of 3 years, or do it 3 years in a row. The Baltimore Ravens, I mean, it was always Ozzy's thing, and Eric DeCosta now has taken all that information and has put his touch on things, absolutely, and have a lot of respect for talking about someone who's grown up the right way and learned the right way and all those sorts of things. They've averaged 9 picks. They've had 104 picks since 2013. They averaged 9 picks a draft. I just talked about Buffalo. I didn't look up all these teams, but I promise you, all of them, it's the same thing. Buffalo average 8 picks per year.
Yeah.
And you say, well, you have compensatory picks and you start off with 7 picks. You'd be amazed how many teams average fewer than 7 picks. Okay. Detroit, they loaded up on those 4 picks in the first 2 rounds. Look at that. That may go down as one of the greatest all-time drafts, truly. Jahmyr Gibbs, Campbell, Laporta, Branch, like phenomenal. And 2022, Hutch, Jameson. Talk about 2 years to rebuild an organization. How did they do it? They didn't go out and they didn't draft a quarterback number 1 overall and plug. They did it with those draft picks. Think of all those stars: Hutchinson, Jameson Williams, Pascal, Kirby Joseph, all the interceptions, Jahmyr Gibbs, superstar, Campbell at linebacker, Laporta, one of the best tight ends in the league, Brian Branch, absolute dog and playmaker. Like those 2 drafts alone, but they had 8 picks that were early in those 2 drafts. You got to nail them.
Right.
Like you got to get those picks right. I'm not devaluing the process of evaluating players. If I did, I would be devaluing my life, right? Like that's what we do. We sit here, I watch tape on that screen and we take notes and we compare this to that and we cross-check each other. But there's a lot of people that can evaluate talent. Then it's figuring out the profile of a player, how he fits what we want to do. Where do we want to attack in the draft? How do we move back and get more picks? So when we pull up that top 10 draft order again, and we start taking a look at it and we say, I'm not sure on Cam Ward. I see there's a lot of talent. I'm not sure on Cam Ward. I'm not sure on Shador. I think he's the best pure passer in this class. I think he has outstanding accuracy and touch. And I think he has instincts as a passer when things break down. But I'm worried about his pocket instincts. I'm worried about holding on to the ball too long, taking too many sacks. I'm worried about his frame a little bit. Doesn't have an elite arm. And I look at the Tennessee Titans and I say, yeah, we need a quarterback. Will Levis isn't the guy. But if I trade back here, right? If I trade back here and I pick up a second this year and a first next year, what would that do? What would that set up my organization for? And if I trade back to, let's say, 6 to the Raiders or even 3 to the Giants, and I'm able to get those, I can still get it. Maybe it's not Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, but I'm still getting a good football player. Let's throw up that top 10 or the top 12 prospects in this class. Here's the updated top 12 as I have it. Got to fill in a couple of those jerseys numbers. It's not unlike me to be missing a couple of jersey numbers. We'll get those. At this point, we're about to shift focus from the college football playoff to the NFL draft. But Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, right? But
Yep.
then there's still Mason Graham at defensive tackle from Michigan. Also Michigan, Will Johnson, the cornerback. There's still pass rushers, Michael Williams, Jalen Walker. You go and there's more beyond that, right? Talk about Pierce at Tennessee, Scorton from Texas A&M. You talk about there's a running back to get a little bit later in the first who looks like an absolute star. You've got offensive tackles a little bit further down. It's not a great tackle class, but if I trade down, get a second this year, get a first next year, get multiple picks and can get an offensive tackle like Josh Connerly that I believe in, Kelvin Banks we've talked about, Will Campbell getting a lot of love recently, by the way.
Yeah,
that's
interesting.
From LSU. But I've got Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward neck and neck, same grade, 91 grade, sitting at 11 and 12. Why am I taking that at number 1 overall? Now, that doesn't mean Tennessee might have Cam Ward at number 1 overall. And there's talk that they may. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm with
you.
They
may have, and the Giants may have Shedeur Sanders as their number 2 overall prospect or number 1 overall prospect. And there's talk that they may. But if I don't believe in those guys, how about I follow this blueprint of Philly, Chiefs, Ravens, recently Detroit, Bills recently, and start the process now. Try to trade back. If not, get my edge. Get a defensive lineman. You know what I mean? Start building a profile for my team and make this the first pick of the new regime. We're going to be physical. We're going to get after your ass. We're gonna load up on defensive prospects early. We're gonna get pass rushers. We're gonna get DBs that can cover these guys in the league. I'll get my quarterback sooner or later. I'll get my quarterback, and I'm gonna keep taking swings, free agency, bring in some retreads if I have to, draft one. But I'm gonna put myself in position as an organization with 2 number 1s next year if I can get it. If there's a quarterback next year that I love, if we see the development in Garrett Nussmeier from LSU, if we see the development in Carson Beck, whoever rises, to the top, maybe I'm in position next year to get a guy that I truly believe in. And I package those picks, move up and go get that guy, just like Kansas City did, just like Buffalo did.
And again, this is why it's another example of why you need the support and just the support of your ownership. You need to be able to go to your ownership and be like, look, man, I know you've seen what happens with the Commanders and they've turned this thing around in a year. And I wish we were in a position to do that. The stars aren't aligned like that for us. This is our plan. It's going to take a minute. Understand that there's going to be some struggles going forward, but we have a really good plan to turn this organization around in the right way and not have that, that year where we're just going to go, 10-7 and be a wild card team because we got, everything fell in place for us. We're building a long-term competitor here. And if you can get ownership to be like, I understand what they're doing, and they should get 2 to 3 years of trying to build this thing out, it's important that you have that kind of support from the ownership group.
I'm just looking at Tucker, one of our producers' notes. Is Tucker a Raiders fan? All I see is commitment to excellence. Just win, baby. What else? I mean, you had a whole production meeting without me, Muench. Freedom to roll. Where do you want to go, brother?
That was the most important part of it, man. That was the most interesting stuff to us. I mean, there is so much stuff that we're going to be getting into. There's so much stuff in the bag for the upcoming. We've got the college football playoff, the national championship preview coming up on Thursday. There's so much stuff to get into there. We're going to start getting after that. I mean, we got the reaction show on Monday night. Then we're going to get into the Senior Bowl. I think we're having Jim Nagy on, the director of the Senior Bowl. That's going to be awesome.
So look at you, pro. You're a pro now. You're promoing this thing, wrapping it up.
There's a lot of stuff to be excited about, but it's got to hold back a little bit.
Why don't you give a rate, review, subscribe type speech for us too? Come on.
I don't have that down yet. Hit like and submit. Hit like and subscribe. If you like us, if you don't like us, I don't know what the whole spiel is. I know you got it down.
I don't have it down. I just tell people I feel like a scumbag an absolute scumbag it's like begging for friends. So if you do like the show, please subscribe. Please click that like button. I've been saying the last couple of weeks, like seeing kind of the numbers and the people, forget the numbers even, like the most fun I've had in a while is getting on the chat during our live show the other night after the Cotton Bowl and just talking to people and like getting everyone going. Like, this is fun. We're building something here. So if you've enjoyed any of it, please do click a couple buttons for us and make sure that you hang around with us, as Muench alluded to and did a brilliant job of. We will be back on Thursday. We're going to preview the college football playoff. We're going to do a whole breakdown there. I'm sure there'll be some draft news between now and then, and we'll get to it as well. So many moving parts in the NFL right now. And then, what is it, Monday night, January 20th, reaction show. And right now, you're going to hear it here. I don't care what's going on. I don't care if it's a 30-point blowout. And FanDuel thinks it might be close to a 10-plus point blowout. 5 minutes left in that game. We're coming on. But it's just more fun. We get the energy going. Yeah. I get, like, you can watch. You could be doing two things. Everyone does it now. Everyone's watching their TV and watching a game, and they're on their screens. So come join us with 5 minutes left. And then immediately following, we'll stay on the air and we'll do a full recap of the college football playoff. And that's a wrap. And like you said, Muench, after that, like, here we go. Here we go. Draft season, got Nagy on. We're getting ready. We're going to the Senior Bowl. We're going to be there all week. We're going to get a bunch of different interviews, put them in the tank, but more so reacting to what's going on at the Senior Bowl. We're going to have access unlike any other outside of like the broadcast group. We'll be on the field. We'll be hosting the show. We'll have people coming by the show saying hello. It's going to be a lot of fun that week. First time we've done it. And we've been going there doing the same thing for 99 was my first one. So like 25 years or so. That's why you see a couple of gray hairs in this beard. But for the first time ever, we're going to do it this way, and we're going to do it our way. And hopefully everyone will enjoy that with us. So until Thursday, hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully we provided a little blueprint, but doing our best. Talk to you soon. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 1-800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.